Everybody. Caught myself off guard there for a second. I'm Misha. I talk about insulin resistance and how to overcome it. So I help people understand what it is, how it's affecting our health, and some easy ways to overcome it. Today, because it's such a big topic right now, because so many people are a little bit confused about what is and what isn't, I'm summarizing some information from top metabolic scientist Dr. Bickman and a few others out there who are doing work around metabolism. And they're talking about these weight loss drugs that people are being given so rapidly now. So we're going to go over primarily GLP-1s, and I hope to gosh I have my notebook because I'm not a specialist on all these, but I want to give you a little bit of information when it comes to these drugs. Now, I have super greens under my nails again. I can't, that stuff is so sticky, I can never get it out after I mix my morning drink. Okay, so insulin resistance is the root of your weight gain. Okay, I hope we all can understand that. I'm going to talk about how that happens in the first place. Then we're going to get into the drugs because you need to know what's going on. It's not that your weight gain makes you insulin resistant, it's that your insulin resistance is helping you gain weight. So let's dive in. Insulin is a hormone put out by your pancreas in response to too much blood sugar in your bloodstream or glucose in your bloodstream. And insulin does an amazing job when we're balanced and when we're, eating normally and just doing things like we should and getting the foods that we should in. Should is the big word, right? So insulin, in response to that blood glucose, then delivers it to every cell in the body. What it really is energy, and the body needs energy to do all its processes. But in today's world, eating too often, eating foods that are incomplete, eating boxed and packaged foods that have been stripped of fibers and nutrients, we have these blood sugar spikes more rapidly and more often than our bodies were meant to handle. So now we have insulin being produced all the time. A couple of things happen. Eventually, the pancreas can start to get tired and slow down its production of insulin. And then you're leaning more towards a type 1 diabetic type reaction where your pancreas just cannot produce insulin. So when we overtax it a long period of time, this is what's happening. But what happens when we have a high amount of insulin? Well, the cells start to get inundated or overwhelmed by the insulin, and they start to say, "No, I'm not having it anymore." In reality, they're getting a little bit inflamed, and the insulin receptors just don't work. So the insulin receptors are like little lock and key mechanisms. Insulin carries the energy to the cell, unlocks the door so that the cell will let the energy in. With insulin resistant, it's like that lock gets a little rusty because it's worn out, it's overused, and it no longer works. And insulin can no longer get the door to the cell open, so the cell's not receiving energy. And now we start to have problems. All of these things up above can be linked to some of that. Now, on the other hand, although we call it insulin resistance, there are some cells that will take in way too much insulin and they become overreactive. And we have a number of other things like blood vessels that are too thick, skin tags, dark skin discoloration. Those are all cells taking in too much insulin. Some cells are really not affected by it. But overall, it causes all this disarray going on in the body. What we want to do is get the insulin levels more normalized so that all of this chaos isn't happening. But long term, what happens when insulin has to be raised so high all the time that it cannot do its job anymore? We start to see that shift of the energy from going into cell skin takes, all of that stuff, to being pushed off into the storage unit or the fat cells of the body. Now you're gaining weight, right? The and the more weight you gain, the more it changes hormones in your body and makes you more likely to be insulin resistant, makes your insulin resistance push a little further. So it's a compounding effect always. It seems like with insulin, it's a compounding effect. So that high level of insulin over a long period of time and the cells that can't take in the insulin and the high amount of glucose that we're eating, it gets pushed into the fat cells. That's the bottom line of it. So now there's an interesting thing I want to talk about with your fat cells. Good morning, Sarah. Um, And good morning to everyone who's hopping in. So look, an interesting thing can happen, and I do have a couple of ladies. I'm going to just actually show you guys. I want you to kind of see and understand what may be happening for some people with weight. So why does it seem that some people get only mildly obese and they're automatically highly diabetic, or some people get less obese or more obese and they're not really recognized as diabetic? So I want to show you a couple of ladies that I work with, and we're going to talk about how this happens or likely happens because I have no study on these two. But this is just okay. So let me, my phone is not working for me right now. There we go. So I'm going to turn this around. I'm going to show you these two ladies, and maybe that will make sense with the weight. And then this is going to start to tie into all the medications. So here's Cindy. She was extremely obese. She's now lost over 160 pounds. But in the beginning, when she started, her A1C was only 5.9. So just barely getting to be pre-diabetic. She had hypertension, hyperlipidemia. Again, she's lost more than 60 pounds since this photo was taken. But overall, she's lost 160 pounds, but was only beginning to be pre-diabetic. And yet, then there's this lovely woman who was mildly obese, but when we look at her A1C, it was 11.5. Now, since this slide was made, her A1C is down to almost normal level. She's lost like, I think 45 pounds now, but she didn't have as much weight to lose, right? But she had a huge A1C. So what's happening there for most people is something I want to talk about. Let me get this turned around so I'm not distracted. So it's all about your fat cells and how they grow. So most of us have been taught and put in a number one. If you've always been told that whatever fat cells you were born with or the fat cells you have until the day you die, they just grow or shrink. If you've been told that, and if that's how you've been operating, because I've just had a doctor tell me this, put a 1 in the chat for me. And I'm going to fix this. So if you've been told that your fat cells never, you never gain more fat cells, I don't know what that was. Put a 1 in the chat for me. Yeah. Okay. And I'm shocked because a year ago I was doing some red light therapy, and I was listening to a doctor talk, and he said, you never get more fat cells. The fat cells you're born with or the fat cells you have, and that's that. They just get big or they get little. They get big or they shrink. Well, so there's two types of ways that fat cells grow. One is hyperplastic and the other is hypertrophic. So hypertrophic means that fat cell is just getting big, big, big. So likely what was happening with Karen. She's one of the people who maybe does not replicate fat cells. So although she started gaining weight, her A1C started going up higher quicker because she had less places to store the fat, the energy. As she got heavier, her body said, "Oof, this is too much, and we need to stop this." Whereas someone like Cindy, the extremely big woman, is probably hyperplastic, meaning her fat cells replicate like little bunnies, and so she had more places to store fat until those fat cells got tired and said, "We're done," and now the blood sugar is rising and the A1C is rising. So it's untrue that you don't ever produce more fat cells. That's absolutely untrue. And not quite half of the population can increase their fat cells. And so there's a percentage of the population that doesn't, and there's a percentage that does. But the fact of the matter is, it can happen. That's important now because we're going to start diving into some of these GLP-1 drugs that I do not like. This is not to advocate for GLP-1s. I want to make sure we all understand my mindset on that. I do not advocate for any of these drugs, but I want to share some information with you about how they work so you can understand part of why I'm not an advocate for them and part of why we're having this talk today. So I'm going to pull my notes out. Now, there's a number of different types of drugs. I don't know unless you guys want me to go I don't know if I need to go over phentermine and topiramate unless anyone wants that information. Then I can share with you what I have here. But I want to start with the ides, like semaglutide, liraglutide, uh, and some of those medications. They're called. They have I. Anytime you see the ide on the back end of it, it's probably going to be a GLP-1 or glucagon like um, peptide agonist. So, ugh. What all this gets down into is we're trying to affect the way the body stores or uses fat. GLP-1s, part of the mechanism that they're doing to help you lose weight is by one of the things that they do is just make you feel satiated. They make you feel hungry, less hungry. They take the cravings away. That's a mechanism that works in the brain. It's like tricking your brain that you're not hungry. That's a great thing, right? Like you don't have cravings. But the problem is, most people within about 2 years, they go off the drug. They're like, I have this new body. I feel great. Everything is going fine. I'm not gaining weight. All of a sudden, the cravings come back. Now, the other thing that happens with those drugs is many of them, not all of them, but many of them have this effect on the fat cells that causes them to be that hyperplastic fat cell. So it's kind of and I don't honestly don't have my head wrapped around the full mechanism of how this works. So they're helping you burn fat, but they're also replicating fat cells in your body. So now you're having more fat cells, even though they're less prevalent. How this helps with the A1C is as it's dumping fat out of the existing cells, it's giving new cells for some of that insulin to go into. Your blood sugar starts to drop and you're more insulin sensitive because there's more fat cells, albeit they're all much, much smaller than the original fat cells. So you're losing weight. But so what happens 2 years later or so when the effects of the satiety on or the lessened hunger and the brainstem goes away, starts to dissipate, and you come back with all the cravings that you had before, but now you have more fat cells. So I'm not saying this happens to everyone, but there's a great possibility. And do you know that it's not going to happen to you? So when I've heard it time and time again, I've talked to many, many people who have used those drugs, and then, they were so happy in the beginning. And then eventually their cravings came back. They started gaining more weight. They started having even worse problems with diabetes than they had before. So that's a problem, I would think, for most of us. Now, part of the way they're acting, so we have to do a little bit. I don't want to get too deep into this, but we have to understand a little bit. Insulin tries to reduce blood sugar um, by getting it out of the bloodstream, right? Glucagon, and I'm just learning this piece too, so bear with me as I learn some new information, you guys. Um, but glucagon does seek to increase your blood sugar. It when we don't eat for a long time and insulin goes to bed, glucagon comes out. Yes, it's releasing fats from the liver and other places. Its whole purpose, really, or one of its main purposes, is to raise your blood sugar back up so that you have that energy in your system. But what I'm just learning is that many, many people who are diabetic or have insulin resistance, because it's been dysregulated for so long, not only have too high of insulin level when they're eating, but when they're in a fasted state, their glucagon levels go way too high because it's trying to mimic the amount of sugar that we've always had in our bodies. That's going to take some time for those to be able to balance out and get back down. One of the effects of the drugs is to reduce that glucagon. So now insulin is down, and it's also reducing the glucagon. So glucagon's not putting as much sugar back into the bloodstream as it was unregulated. And all of that sounds great, right? And it can work amazingly. We can eat foods, we can do things. Part of the system that I do helps raise your glucagon like peptide by 70%, but naturally by supporting your system and not not artificially coming in and dampening down glucagon, but just by supporting natural levels of these hormones in the body by giving you nutrients. We're going to get into some of that later, but it's important to understand some of these medications. Now, I have notes on several different ones, but I think I just want to hang out with the GLP ones today because I did have some questions about inositol and berberine yesterday, and I want to go over that too. But does anybody have questions so far? I do want to say that although I'm looking at my notes for sure. Oh, yeah. So one of the things is like with liraglutide, unfortunately with liraglutide, they're coming out showing that there's an increased risk of cancer in the thyroid with liraglutide, and they've been seeing more and more people come up with that. Now, um, some of the other IDEs, they inhibit glucagon, da da da. Oh, that's right. This is the thing. This is the one thing, you guys, sometimes I have to re-trigger my memory. So one of the other things that GLP-1 is doing, those GLP-1 agonists, meaning they're increasing the effect of it, is it slows down gastric emptying. And what that means is, I'm not sure if you're aware, but like your esophagus is not just always open. It collapses and it opens. So all of those muscles are opening and contracting depending on whether we're eating or not. That includes all the way down through the stomach. The liver and the gallbladder have to contract, or the gallbladder has to contract to move stuff along. The intestines have to contract to move stuff along. One of the things that's happening with GLP-1 drugs is they're kind of paralyzing that whole gut. So now your food is sitting in your stomach longer, which on the offset is a really good thing because for the most part, our food is moving through our system way too quickly. And so we're getting the hit of sugar quickly, but we're also not getting all of the nutrients from the foods because it's all passing through so quickly in our system. So slowing it down seems like a good idea, right? It does. But what's happening with these drugs is now that that intestinal and gut system is slowing down and in effect kind of being numbed and paralyzed, I'm going to say, is it just sits in your gut and starts to rot. And it gets to a point where it's really heavy in um, the colon, and now it's not moving food through, or the intestines, and it's not moving food through, and people are going to the hospital with blockages in their intestinal tract because of the slowed gastric emptying. The higher the dose, the more it happens. Also, it's helping you feel fuller longer because you're not passing food through your system, so that food is actually still sitting in your gut, and yeah, you are a little bit fuller. Okay, so are you Lori? She says she has to take Miralax 3 times a week because of the GLP-1. Are you still on GLP-1s, Lori? I'd love to know that. Your family has a history of pancreatic cancer, so your doctor said exactly. Janice, those drugs really increase your risk of losing pancreatic function. I'm not going to get into all the mechanisms of why, but if we think about forcing our liver to produce, or not our liver, our pancreas to produce more insulin than it needs or than it's meant to, we start to have problems. And anytime we have an overactive something or an underactive something, we start to become at risk for cancer. So one of the problems with these drugs for me is that they tend to cause all of these problems that are long term. And nobody's really advising people about the long term effects. Great, in the short term, you're losing weight. Great, you have this satiety, but in the long term, what has it done to your body? And some of the drugs, like this is not a GLP-1, but like metformin, I'm thinking about, they really don't understand how it works. They just know it works. So they're not clear yet on the mechanisms in the body of what's happening with metformin. I would love to go over some of that in just a minute. But so GLP-1s, they're helping your gut slow less often so you're staying fuller longer. It's shutting down cravings in the brainstem. And so now you're having satiety in the brain, you're having satiety in the gut, and that's all great because you're eating less. But here's my issue. If you're not eating the way I'm going to talk to you about eating for diabetes and you're doing these drugs, you're going to rebound. There's no, it's not an if and or but, it's you will rebound if you haven't changed your understanding about what caused this whole problem in the first place. Those drugs, is anybody counseling you on how this happened and what you need to do lifelong, dietary and nutrition wise, Lori, to continue on with these drugs? And this is not, I'm just interested in what you're being told. I know what I've heard other people tell me, but I'd be interested in your opinion on the kind of care and counseling you're getting about around these drugs. Or are you just being given the drug and told to take it, it's going to help? Because that's what most people tell me. Cancer thrives off high sugar levels as well. And I agree with that. So here's the thing, when you have the high sugar levels, this wasn't supposed to be talk about cancer, but it does thrive off of that. These high sugar levels, through a number of actions I won't have time to get into today, reduces vascularity, and that reduces oxygen to certain areas of the body. Now, cancer thrives in those areas. Okay. So high sugar and less oxygen. Now we have this soup that can lean one, it's like a soup base that could lead to cancer or could lead to some other things, right? So we want to be careful about blood sugars. We want to be careful about I hate to hear people come tell me that they're having these problems with the GLP-1 drugs. So Lori, I'm sorry, I kind of figured that was going to be the answer, because after I've talked to multiple people who are on these drugs and currently on the drugs, that's the answer they're all giving me, is they're not being educated about the food, the insulin resistance, the anything that caused them to be sick in the first place. And that's a big problem. So I'm going to tell you that this is my opinion, but I would veer to guess that in the next decade we start to hear a lot of the damaging side effects. We're already starting to see it. I saw a documentary on a woman who was doing these drugs, had to go to the hospital because her gastrointestinal tract was blocked. Um, Went off the drug, realizing she could die, started gaining the weight back almost immediately, went back on the drug because she was addicted to the feeling of being thin, ended back up in the hospital and realized, what am I doing to myself? You're given the drug because your A1C was 8.8 and started immediately on 0.5. So, Lori, here's the thing. I cannot argue that when somebody's A1C is dangerously high, that getting that down is important, right? We got to get the blood sugars out of the system. But what really should be happening is some education on why this glucose dysregulation happened in the first place. We're going to dive into some of that, and I'll help you understand that now. Even Dr. Bickman said, when somebody's like severely diabetic, they're having problems and their life is, like it's at risk. He's like, if you have to at that point, do the lowest dose possible until you can kind of get yourself under control, and then come off of it again as quickly as possible, so that it's not causing this long-term damage to your body. Um, so there's a lot of really good things that can come from those GLP-1 drugs, getting the glucagon levels down, all of that. But the negative side effects to me outweigh those benefits. The other thing is that when we were doing those GLP-1 drugs, and I had somebody on who was really mad and said, I had a DEXA scan and this didn't happen to me and blah, blah, blah. That's great. That's 1 in a million people. But there have been multiple studies on these drugs. Through all of this that's happening, it's reducing the amount of muscle you have. When you have insulin resistance, you're already reducing the sensitivity of muscle and the ability to build muscle. Now, with these medications, they're exacerbating that. Part of what you're losing as weight for these drugs is muscle. And in fact, studies have shown that up to 40% of the weight loss, so if you take off 100 pounds, what they're saying is that about 60 pounds of it may be fat, but about 40 pounds of it may also be muscle. Now, I want to lose fat. I don't want to lose muscle. Muscle we need. And as an older woman, as a 60-year-old woman, I'm very, very aware of that. as I get even older, the amount of muscle I have is going to be very important in my health. And I'm also very aware that at the age of 60, I have less ability to replace muscle than I did when I was 30. So now, if I'm doing a medication that's causing me to lose tremendous amounts of weight, but now I've lost 40% of my muscle mass, now there's a lot of other problems that can happen, and we have less protection for our bones, less strength in our bones as well. It all gets to be a big mess, I think, especially the older you get. So, Lori, we're going to educate a little bit on the food and whatnot here in just a minute. So, anyway, the GLP-1 drugs, you guys, um, people I know people are finding great results with it. I have a friend who did them. She was losing weight. I didn't know she was on GLP-1 until because she just didn't say anything for about a year, and she's tiny now. I'd be interested to see how she does in a couple of years. I love her dearly. I hope she fares well. But I almost lost my mind when I found out one of my close friends was doing a GLP-1 drug, because you're not educated about what's going on in your body. So I took some time to educate her about what the drug was doing to her body, and she immediately started to come off of the drug and is now not doing it. But um, she does look thin. She is thin. I don't get to see the rest of her. So part of that, when you have that muscle loss, you'll see people's faces look gaunt, like all the fat's gone from their face and their skin just kind of droops off their face. But that's happening all over their body. So with that kind of weight loss, then you see people who have these drapey folds of skin on their glutes. They look like they have a flat butt. There's, just nothing there anymore. They've lost a lot of muscle mass because of those drugs. So there's that, just understand that that's a possibility too. I know they use the drugs at a much smaller dose for diabetes. The thing for me is, after working in multiple different doctors' offices, it's like a game of Russian roulette. Are you going to be the one that has the really severe effect to it, or are you going to be the one that doesn't? And I guess for some people it's worth the risk. For me, it just isn't. So that's why I'm not an advocate of it. Now, let's talk about what does work. So as I talk about what works, I do want to tie in the inositol and berberine question that was asked. I want to explain what they are a little bit and why they're working, and why I really feel like the balance that I use is so much better of an option than those. But first, we got to understand again. Remember that if we're getting too much blood sugar, or too much sugar into our bloodstream, and it's spiking too quickly. So one of the ways we want to realistically deal with your diabetes, your overweight, all of that, is to get the blood sugars down, right? So that's why they're giving you the drug, because they're trying to get the blood sugar down, but they haven't told you why your blood sugar spiked in the first place. I'm going to go over 6 tips in just a second too to help you understand that. But those high levels of blood sugar are what's causing the problem. And this isn't just about, hey, cut out all the sugar, cut out all the potatoes, all the bread, all the whatever. Now, limit them, yes, absolutely, because they're causing the problem. But if you don't understand what's causing the problem for you, you don't fix it, you're going to go right back. So the foods we eat cause these insulin spikes. When they're causing the insulin spikes, part of the reason that they're causing the blood sugar spike, which relates to the insulin spike, is that fiber has been stripped from our system. Berberine is a type of fiber, so we're going to get into that. But that's been stripped out of our system. And why is fiber so important? Why is everybody so big on fiber? There's people like me, like I'm not 100% carnivore like the Peterson girl. I'm not, I'm more midline. I eat more meat than I do vegetables. That's what works for my body. Some people eat more vegetables than they do meat. Some people eat all vegetables and don't eat meat. All of us need fiber, because it helps regulate our blood sugars. How it helps regulate our blood sugars is it slows down the delivery of them into the system. But there's different types of fiber. There's soluble and there's insoluble fibers. Soluble fibers soak up water, and they can make this big sticky gelatin mass in your gut. That's a great thing. Now, as that starts to swell in your gut, you're starting to feel fuller, and you feel fuller longer. And then as you eat, all of the food goes into the sticky mass and starts to kind of hold in the gut for a little bit longer, but pass through so that we're slower, so that we're giving a time release of those nutrients into our system. So the insoluble fibers, though, don't soak up water and don't do any of that. What they do is they're long strands of fiber. This green, super green, is driving me nuts. Um, and it creates like a basket weave kind of mesh in your system. Those insoluble fibers are really great for cleaning out the system, keeping stuff moving along, keeping the walls of the colon cleaned up so that there's not stuff sticky, icky in there that's causing problems later on. So now we have a basket. If we combine the two, we have a basket weave mesh that's like holding the gelatin substance and cleaning the intestinal tract as it moves through. And the gelatin substance is holding on to the sugars so that they don't hit your bloodstream as quickly. Now we have blood glucose regulation. Why do we have this dysregulation in our blood glucose now? Because fibers have been stripped from all of our foods, especially our packaged and boxed foods, and they'll be like high in fiber, um, but you don't know what kind of fiber is in there. Is it just the kind that's going to sweep out your gut? By the way, too much of that kind of fiber is really abrasive in your gut and can cause problems itself. So the insoluble fibers, too much of it can cause problems. And that's what most of the fibers you're getting are these insoluble fibers to help keep your gut cleaning out, help keeping stuff moving on through. So if we can put back some of the things that are stripped out of our food, now we can understand what our body needs to do to slow down the delivery of this glucose into our system. There's a big misunderstanding. People think if I eat all raw vegetables and raw fruits, I'm safe. And yet I have a number of these people who are vegetarian or pescatarian come and say they're having blood sugar problems. How? They're not eating boxed foods. Well, some of them are. I think the worst, so I think probably, and this is my opinion, and this is just from what I've seen from people. So I hope it doesn't upset someone, but I'm going to say this. Pescatarians probably in that area, I feel like I've seen to be the healthiest because they're more cognizant of just getting everything from like farmers markets and not going to the grocery store much for any of their food at all. Whereas people who are trying this vegetarian thing will start adding in a lot of substitute foods like the Impossible Burger and the Impossible Meats, which are full of chemicals that cause inflammation in the body and can increase insulin resistance. If they also don't have the right amounts of fiber packed in with all of that goodness, then you have a blood sugar spike anyway. So if you're vegetarian and you're still relying on processed foods, you're still at risk. The other part of this is that our food has been modified. The seeds that we grow food from are not the same as what we grew food from before. I grew up on a small family farm in North Idaho. It was just like 5 acres, no ranch style stuff, no anything. But we had our own cows, pigs, goats, chickens. We had gardens that we grew all of our stuff in. That's how I grew up. And I remember what we got out of the garden, even peas. I'm shocked. Like I remember the peas we used to pick in the garden, and it was tough to find these big juicy peas. They were more often crunchy and a little bit bitter, but now it seems like those green peas are very large and sweet. So they've modified fibers out of most of our raw organic foods to make them bigger, better, plumper, juicier. And all you guys have to do is type in a link, type in a search that says what our foods used to look like. And you're going to start to see the difference between what our food's supposed to be and what we're getting now. And it's all been marketing. So these food industry companies are making foods that are filling your need for bigger, better, juicier, but it's not really healthy for you because this is why part of the reason why we have this blood sugar spike. Now we also have it's correlational, right? Observational. But what we notice is that about um, about the 1960s, 1970s, when the dietary guidelines, remember the food pyramid, and like grains, fruits, and vegetables were on the bottom, and fats and meats were at the top, like don't have those. When that pyramid came out, sorry, I don't like that sign. When that pyramid came out, it started off what we think is this obesity epidemic, because now we're heavily laden with foods that are really high in carbohydrates. We're not getting all the protein and fats. They see a correlation between that old dietary guideline coming out and the increase of obesity in our nation now. We also add to the fact that most of us are sedentary. Now we have doubled down on the problem. So what we need to do is reverse that. There's a new dietary guideline that comes out, and it shows that protein, especially animal proteins, are should be the basis of your diet. Fats are right down there in the biggest part of what your diet should be. And guess what? Those grains and stuff are at the very top. Fruits are below them, and vegetables are below them. But the biggest portion of what they're saying for dietary guidelines is protein. And I really feel like this is what's turning people's health around all around the world. And there's a lot of science about the amount of protein we need. So if we can understand that we're eating a little bit backwards, and that the food that we're eating has been designed to make us hungrier. So when they strip out food, you're not, or strip out fiber, you're not as satiated or not feeling as full as often. So you're more likely to buy more food. The blood sugar spikes, insulin delivers it. Now your blood sugar is low, you're hungry. You go get another candy bar, a bag of chips, a high sugar soda, a Bang energy drink to try and get energy into your cells. And what you're doing is increasing your insulin resistance because you have a dysregulation in how your body utilizes energy because you've been giving it too much of one kind of energy. So we've got to add fibers back in. We've got to stop eating all the time. That's the big basis of it. So the 6 simple tips are this: fiber before you eat, every time you eat, prioritize protein, fill up with fats and don't fear them, and then limit your carbs. The 5th and 6th are do some intermittent fasting. I talked a little bit about fasting yesterday and all of its benefits. It's only 16 hours, guys. It's only 16 hours that you're not putting food in your face. No, you're not losing muscle mass during that time. No, you're not getting brain fog and fatigued and all of that during that time. Your body's amazing. It will work with you, and it will start to retrain itself in how its metabolism works. So the 6th one is move your body. A muscle that's moving is more sensitive to insulin than a muscle that's not. Now, here's the interesting thing. I'm going to come back to metformin. The paradoxical thing with metformin is, good morning, Margie, with metformin. And we've been talking about GLP-1s, but I just want to bring this out about metformin. You see all these health gurus, these longevity gurus saying that, oh, metformin is great for, longevity. But there's been no human studies on that. They really don't know. There's no studies that show that it increases your longevity. The studies that they're talking about were largely done in insects, and that metabolism is very different from ours. So let's be careful with that. But one thing we do know is that when you're working out, you're increasing your mitochondrial function, you're increasing the energy, your ATP in your system. So now you have an increase of energy function in your system. But metformin dampens that energy. So it's as if you have a light switch. When you exercise, you turn the light switch on, the lights go on, and you have energy flowing. You're not exercising, the lights go off, right? Well, metformin comes along and says, oh, exercise, you turn the light switch on, I'm turning it back off. So now you're lower and slower in your energy use in your muscle, and you start having some muscle wasting as well. And it'll be interesting to see what comes. Metformin's been around longer than others, but yes, they do seem to see that it actually negates the effect of energy production through exercise. So be careful with that too. Now, all right, back to, so what I do, you guys, what I've done to reduce all of this, and I talk about this every morning because it's so important. When we're talking about GLP-1, when we're talking about satiety and slowing down this gut emptying, we're going to talk about a natural way to do it that's giving your body nutrients and supporting you from the inside out. So you see me drinking a tea every morning. This tea in the morning helps me feel full by getting clues to my brain that I have energy, so I'm not feeling hungry. By giving my gut a little bit of a distended feeling, a little bit of like I'm full, so I'm not hungry during my fasting periods. And the tea does not break my fast for this purpose. So This tea also has anti-cancer, antioxidant, anti-inflammatory properties, and it's neuroprotective, so it has expression protection for your brain cells. So it also is good for helping regulate your blood pressure. So I'm not just talking about reducing blood pressure, I'm talking about normalizing blood pressure. So this tea is great for all of that. It's 375 times more potent in these chlorogenic acids that are doing a lion's share of the work than any standard bagged yerba mate tea. So no, you're not going to get the same effects by running out and buying yerba mate tea. If you want to take 375 bags and steep it, then take your chances on the amount of pesticides, toxins, and molds you're getting in that, as well as the cost of that. That's your business. Me, I want something that's been purified, that's hyper pure, that is giving me convenience and giving me all of those effects every day. The second step of what I do is I add in those fibers before I eat my 2 meals of the day. I'm probably going to have my first meal early today because I'm trying to shift my eating window so that I cut off my eating earlier in the evening so that it can help improve my sleep score, right? So that's a whole other story. But then before I eat, I just drink this 10 minutes before. I don't have a bottle with me. I do. So I just put some water in a bottle like this, and then about this much water is all I put in. And then I shake it up 4 or 5 times, drink it down. Now, what happens is this starts making me feel fuller longer. It starts slowing down those carbohydrates, scientifically studied to reduce a blood sugar spike by 20% with one packet. So, do I have to worry about the occasional times I have pasta? No, I just take this beforehand. If I'm really worried about it, I can have two beforehand, and now I'm decreasing my blood sugar spike by 28%. So that's what that is. Though that little packet has more than just the 7 different types of soluble and insoluble fiber. It has nutrients. It has vitamins and minerals in it that are all designed to help with a healthy metabolism. If you're interested in getting it, just check out my link in my profile. That's where you're going to find it. Now, let's go back to inositol and berberine and the product that I love to use, okay? So, inositol is like it's a blood sugar alcohol that's derived from some foods. And I'm not a I think I have a list up of the foods that you can get inositol from. So fruits like cantaloupe, oranges, grapefruits, limes, kiwis, nectarines, mangoes, beans, legumes, all of those things. But what's happening with inositol is that there are some studies that show that it may improve insulin sensitivity and lower blood glucose levels. But right now, there's a disparity in studies. Some studies say it doesn't impact it at all. Some studies say it does impact it. So there's not anything out there really that's going to prove at this point in time that inositol is effective at lowering blood sugars. From a scientific looking at paper study type thing, there's just too much back and forth between whether it works or not, because there's just as many studies that say that it doesn't work at all as the studies that say it does. So that's pretty simple. Then berberine. Now, berberine is a plant-based compound, and it's been used in Chinese medicine for a long, long time. And I have no doubt that that's one of the reasons that they're able to maintain their health by this natural resource. Okay, so it's shown that it can help reduce blood glucose levels by improving your insulin sensitivity and inhibiting the glucose production or the breakdown of those little packages of glucose in your liver for redistribution in your system. So it has shown some promise as a potential type 2 diabetes um, uh, help, right? Treatment, whatever. But then when we get to balance, this one that I've been talking about, this includes berberine, but it includes so much more in the way of the other fibers that we need. And it has the studies that show that it actually does reduce this blood sugar spike. We've had people, I've done like ketone monitors and glucose monitors, and my blood sugars stay lower when I use this than when I don't. So I've seen it in myself that even when I'm having those high glucose meals, if I use this, I have less of a glucose spike than if I don't. So to me, that's part of it. That those 2 drinks that I drink at 3 points during the day are all I did to take off 55 pounds and reverse my type 2 diabetes. Now, the ladies I showed earlier, and if you didn't see them, I'm going to show you guys a couple of people that have been using the system and have had great results. So you can see this is not just about me talking, and I'm going to show you my picture too. Okay. So as embarrassing as this is, but we're going to do this. Oh, hey, there's Misha. Let's take this off. Okay. So that was me before. Look at that face. That was me when I had just been diagnosed with diabetes, or about a year after, and I was struggling. I couldn't figure out how to get it under control, and I was able to lose 55 pounds by just doing the 2 drinks in a day and not doing anything crazy with my diet. Now, yeah, I have put on a little bit of weight since then, and it's primarily, as I've been studying, related to the fact that I had to have my gallbladder removed, and then that impacts my metabolism. But when I do my labs, when I do my studies, as far as the impact of insulin, that is still under control. I just have some other hormonal things going on because of no gallbladder. That can happen. By the way, insulin resistance can lead to gallbladder removal or problems. So this is Alexis. She's now actually a size 12 or size 6. She was a size 14. She didn't have diabetes, but she had a family history of it and wanted to prevent that from happening to her. Oh, okay. Let me answer that. So this is another friend of mine. You can tell this tummy is an insulin resistant tummy. Now she's lost even more weight since here. Her moods are better, her anxiety's better, kidney issues, all of that's better for her. And all she did was the system. The product, I'll get you the link to whoop. I've got to get this put in over here. TikTok, unfortunately, doesn't let me put these in, or I could just do this directly for you guys. In TikTok, you got to go to my profile and look. But here, these are the 2 links. One gets you to my website, and one gets you to purchase. So this friend, she has done amazing on the system, and she said it was the easiest thing she's done. Now, she's a smoker. She has other things going on, so she's at risk for insulin resistance. Smoking increases that. Now, this is a bodybuilder friend of mine. She actually trains other bodybuilders. This was her. Nobody knew she was suffering from diabetes. She ate good. She did all the meal prep. She does all the workouts. But you can still suffer if you're not understanding what's happening with your food. Same time in off season, same suit, same weight. She has all of this excess bloating. You can see it in her face and her tummy. Now on the Feel Great system, all of this bloating and stuff has gone from her, and her diabetes is under control, and she's functioning better in life. So do you have to be fat, overweight, extremely unhealthy for this to work? No, you don't. At any stage of health, if you're needing help, this works. Jason has now lost over 180, close to 190 pounds. He was told to do the drugs. He was told to do the gastric bypass. He never did, and he's like thankful every day that he never did. His pictures, I need to get newer pictures of him. This was at about 150 pounds weight loss. He's now lost like 190 pounds. A1C, all the stuff the doctor was concerned about is under control, and he's just doing amazing. So I got a couple more here. I also want to talk about, remember Cindy? Now she's lost over 160 pounds in just over a year, never touched any drugs, and is just doing fantastic. And she's all excited about it because it works so well for her. She's doing what I do now. She's helping other people with it now. She has her own channel talking about insulin resistance now because this worked so well for her. Karen is the same. She's also doing this now. Because it not only worked, and both of these ladies, not only did it work for them, it helped the health of their husbands. So if you're a wife who loves your husband and you know he's struggling and you know that you can help, this system actually helped both partners in the situation. And then Steffi, my girl Steffi, tall, lean, beautiful Steffi. She has a different body than me, but she still had some weight to lose. She's gone from a size 14 to a size 6. She has what she calls 4-pack abs, and she never does sit-ups. It's all about that she got the visceral fat down and some of the subcutaneous fat down. It's helped her with her not her diabetes, her ADHD and her heartburn, and it is helping numbers of people in her family as well. Dia, her entire family does the system, her husband, her 2 children, because it's helped all of them. And one of her children, now she's lost over 60 pounds. She's a cancer survivor. She had a number of other issues. The Feel Great system has helped her manage everything. Now, this kiddo is a type 1 diabetic. He started the system when he was about 11 years old. He ended up losing 35 pounds at 11 years old, has better moods, better mental clarity, performing better in school, and he's reduced the load of, he rarely ever has to use fast-acting insulin now that he's on the system, but he's also reduced the load of his long-acting insulin as well, which is huge for a kiddo. Like now he feels like he can have a more normal life. And I have a number of type 1 diabetics who are doing it. Edema and neuropathy, that's my own feet before and after. So that's the system, and there's so many more stories than that. I just have not been really good about keeping stories up lately, but this is also my story. This was me before the system. This was me about a year on the system, and in this picture I'm donating my cane, my walker, and you'll see there's disability plates on the car. And I have not been in the gym for a while, but the system allowed me to be able to get back into the gym. This was after I'm working on getting back in the gym. I talk about that all the time, and I really want to because I love the space. Now, so that's all of that, you guys. If you're interested in the system, just go to my profile link, get a hold of me, and I'll get you the information, and I'll help coach you through. So it's difficult for me. I have people contact me all day who are like, I didn't use you as my coach, but I need you to help me. And I want to help everybody, but I always have to prioritize my own people first and let your coaches help you as much as possible. So, okay, I hope that helps with everything. Tomorrow, I'm not quite sure. Is there anything you guys want me to go over tomorrow? I hope, did this help you guys understand GLP-1s and the mechanisms a little bit? A little bit. I hope that it was helpful. I hope that you understand it better. I didn't see any super negative comments come through. What about, okay, let me go back because there are some questions here and I missed a bunch. What about people that have had gastric bypass with the swelling of the stomach? Yeah, okay. So people with gastric bypass, I've had a number of people use this system who still have gastric bypass. Thanks, Ro. Who've had gastric bypass and are still able to use the system. The fibers, what I want everybody to understand is the fibers not just about the blood glucose regulation. It is greatly about that, but it's actually what people don't understand is this is also a prebiotic. So now it's helping feed a healthier gut microbiome. So even people with gastric bypass, would I tell a person with gastric bypass to drink a full packet? No, I would say what I've done with people is start off with like 1/8 of a teaspoon, see how you deal with it, and then work up to as much as you can tolerate and still get nutrition in. So I would absolutely say I have people who've had gastric bypass. In fact, I have one lady, and I haven't put her video up. I got to go back and find it, that I recorded. She had gastric bypass. She had been on the medications. She lost a lot of weight. She was feeling great. And then she started putting the weight back on. And she started losing the weight again. And now she says she would never recommend to anyone the gastric bypass or those medications. So this is what she's doing. So Pebbles, if you're interested in talking to me about this more natural way, you can talk to me as much or as little as you want. I'm here to help. Just message me through that link in my bio, and we can talk about it. This does not make you feel awful. So would you like to switch that injection for something that you drink at 3 points during the day? And by the way, Every time I take a sip of this, I know that I just helped my body. Tons of vitamins, minerals, and other vitamins and other components in this that are adding to my health while helping me feel full, while helping me not have all that breakthrough hunger. It tastes great, and I can have it throughout the day and not worry. I don't have to worry. Yeah, if I'm drinking 8 or 10 of these a day, I might have to worry, right? But if I have 3 to 5 of these a day, which normally I just have two, I'm still safe, and I know that I'm giving myself health every time I sip on it. So that's what I think about is every sip of this amazing drink is helping me get healthier. I've been doing some I've invested in a system that scans the body, and it can get down to like what's going on with your chromosomes and all that. So I've been doing regular scans, and I wasn't really paying attention because I didn't think, this could tell me about my insulin resistance or not until I did a scan for somebody and I'm looking at their labs, and I'm not a doctor. They were personal friends, so I was able to talk frankly with them. Their lipids were struggling, their heart was struggling, their liver was struggling, their glucose levels were high, and I'm like, "Oh, man, we need to talk about you getting insulin resistance under control because you're a younger woman, and if you don't get control of this now, you're going to have major problems as you get older and you have kiddos. You've gotta be healthy for those kiddos." So, we're working to get her on the system regularly and help her with all of those issues. So, and when she does, she feels so much better. So instead of feeling all the negative, I'm full, I'm nauseous, I'm whatever, I have amazing energy, I have amazing mental clarity, I have amazing function going on in my body. My body at 60 years old is healing a bunch of damage from before. And all I do is drink a tea all day long. It's my preferred drink. And then before I eat anything, when I go to have breakfast in about 10 minutes, I will just drink one of these beforehand. So you have kidney disease. Yeah, you don't have to be nauseous to keep your hunger levels down, Pebbles. I would really love to talk to you. I'll put my number in here too. You guys can talk with me. Sounds familiar. You have kidney disease, high blood pressure, thyroid issues, and high cholesterol. Those are all, yeah, symptoms of insulin resistance. Now, kidney disease, once it gets to a certain point, we really can't reverse it, right? So if you see your kidney panel getting worse, you want to address it now. Now, I have a guy who had stage 3 kidney disease, was, going through all the paperwork and the preparation to have surgeries pre-dialysis. That man never ended up going on dialysis, having any of those surgeries, and now has amazing kidney function. So all he did was the same thing I'm doing. You guys, when you understand that you support your body with nutrition, then it gets healthy instead of tearing it down by saying, like, it would be like, I don't know, it would be like cutting your leg with a chainsaw and then just wrapping a dirty rag around it to say, "It's not bleeding, I can't see the cut anymore. Um, it's held together, we're good." Right? Instead of going in and cleaning out the wound and taking proper wound care, we're wounded our bodies with too much sugar. So Herzbad, let's talk about fiber tomorrow then. Perfect. I love talking about fiber. And you guys, it really is the key. Um, I I can't imagine my life without the fiber that I take and the health that it's given me. Okay, it is time for me to hop off. You guys, thanks for joining me. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for all the questions. We will talk more about fiber and why it's so important tomorrow. Um, Hereditary, you're not overweight and exercise 4 to 5 times a week. So you oh, that's a big mouthful. So I'm like so much it's like when you guys say certain things, it's like the information is 100 kindergartners trying to jump out of my head at once. But let's talk about it. Yes, there's a hereditary component. You still have to flip the switch of that genetic component that pushes you into all these things. The switch is the insulin resistance and the high amount of sugar that we're getting. So if we can take that switch and stop it from being overactive, you have a better chance of managing these things. So Pebbles, I was a world champion athlete. I won 4 world championships in powerlifting, um, which means I took home gold every time. It was only the last year that I competed. I had 2 hip replacements and needed a knee replacement that I ever took home a silver or bronze in any discipline that I did. Overall, I still took home the gold. But that means that I was in the gym 6 days a week, about 3 hours a day. I was doing keto. I was doing all the things. I was overweight. I was having symptoms, but I wasn't being told I was diabetic. And the doctors couldn't figure out why my blood pressure was out of control. They couldn't figure out why all of this stuff was going on. So when I started to address my insulin resistance, all of that got better. My insulin resistance got better. Everything started happening for me. So exercise helps, but if we don't understand the core of what's causing those blood sugars to spike, we're still going to have problems. Okay. So we can talk a little bit more about that tomorrow too. And Pebbles, let me see if this will go in here. If you guys want to get a hold of me, let's see if the number will show up for you guys, because sometimes it does and sometimes it does not. On YouTube, TikTok, or YouTube and Facebook, that number is scrolling across right now. Okay, guys, I'll come back in the morning. We'll talk some more about some of this. We'll talk about fiber, and we're going to talk about how that impacts your health and why it's so much better. Now, I don't know if the person who asked about inositol, berberine, and balance is here, but is everybody, at least overall clear about the difference between them? And one of the reasons why I love balance over just straight berberine, because there's so many more things in this nutritionally that have really been proven to reduce my blood sugar spike. But one of them is berberine that's in here. So now we're getting like an amped up version of the things we need in our system. So I will talk to you all in the morning. I love answering questions. So contact me if you have them, and let's see what we can do for you. In the meantime, I'll wait and see you in the morning. Have a good day, you guys.